Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Missouri Prairie Foundation's webinar, Dark Sky as a Natural Resource, presented by Dr. V.U. Gokhale. My name is Carol David, Executive Director of the Missouri Prairie Foundation and its Grow Native program, and I'm very pleased to introduce Dr. Gokhale, who is a professor of physics and astronomy at Truman State University in Kirksville, Missouri. He earned his Bachelor of Science in Physics and his Master of Science in Nuclear Physics from the University of Bombay in India, followed by a PhD in Astronomy from Louisiana State University in 2007. He lives just outside of Kirksville with his wife, Michelle, 2 young children, a dog, and a cat. He maintains his sanity, he says, by watching Seinfeld, Quentin Tarantino movies, and listening to Dad Rock. Dr. Gokhale loves the night sky in America's national parks and dreams of someday becoming an astronomy park ranger at Arches National Park in Utah. This webinar is being recorded, and a link to a recording of the webinar will be emailed to you tomorrow, along with resources mentioned during the presentation. Following the presentation, I will relay questions you may have to Dr. Gokhale. If you have any questions, please type them into the Q&A section on your screen. Welcome, Dr. Gokhale. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you, Carol, and thank you, Emily, and thank you, everyone, for being here despite your kind of busy schedules. I want to thank the organizers at the Prairie Foundation for providing me and Dark Sky Missouri with this opportunity to talk to you about matters that concern us. And I guess my job, partly at least in this webinar, is to convince you that the things that we care about at Dark Sky Missouri, you should care about as well and do something about them. And I'd also like to say that while I am the speaker here today, I want to acknowledge the work done by my colleagues at Dark Sky Missouri, Dark Sky International, Truman State University, the American Astronomical Society, and Dark Sky advocates across the United States and indeed the entire world. And without the constant encouragement and consequential efforts of my colleagues, especially at Dark Sky Missouri, I wouldn't really have much to say at all. And I wish today to make you aware and hopefully stir you to become an active participant in what I'll refer to as the Dark Sky movement. And this movement involves not just appreciating and addressing the problem of light pollution, but also understanding and implementing the rather straightforward solutions to solving this problem. And what I'll do at the beginning is kind of set the scope of this so that you can place the Dark Sky movement, as I've called it, in a context that might be more familiar to you. I'm going to refer to 2 books, and the books are just placeholders to, again, identify with movements that many of you, if not all of you, are aware of. And the first one I'm going to refer to is, as you will see, is a book that was written in the 1960s by Rachel Carson, which is Silent Spring, and it was a revolutionary book, and I've kind of summarized in one word, if you will, the basic idea behind the book. And again, I'm simplifying, obviously, because I want to get the main message across, which is that something that was introduced into our natural environment as a blessing initially, as something that is going to solve all our problems related to food and resources and world hunger and all those kinds of things, which is chemically altering the natural environment to benefit, quote unquote, benefit, say, crop production, pesticides, in fact, turned out to be a disaster of monumental proportions because of the side effects, if you will. If you want to call them side effects, it was really the main effects, which was it was just killing indiscriminately. There was no filter between good, bad, and ugly. It was just basically something that, again, was presented to us as a great benefit to society, and of course, turned out to be quite contrary. And one of the quotes from Rachel Carson's book, there are many that I could quote, but one that kind of stands out in relevance to what we're discussing today is the following. It's a short quote, so let me just read that. All this is being risked, and for what? And all this meaning biodiversity, the natural kind of ecosystem equilibrium, all that was being sacrificed. Rachel Carson asked, or risked for what? Future historians may well be amazed by our distorted sense of proportion. How could intelligent beings seek to control a few unwanted species by a method that contaminated the entire environment and brought the threat of disease and death even to their own kind? Yet, this is precisely what we have done. And it is startling if you read even the first couple of chapters of this book, and then compare it to what, and this is again 60 years ago, remember, and then you look at what we are doing to our natural environment by introducing indiscriminately artificial light, the almost one-to-one correspondence. You can literally take the word pesticide, where Rachel Carson refers to pesticide in her book, and change it to artificial light, and everything makes exactly the same. The point remains valid by that simple replacement of a couple of words. And so that's somewhat startling. It's both reassuring that there are kindred souls, not just around us today, but even 50, 60, 100, maybe even thousands of years ago, there were people who thought farther than the immediate concern about, say, security or whatever it is that we are worried about at night. But the thought process about how immediate solutions may not be something that is in our long-term interest is reassuring. It's also somewhat depressing because we somehow keep repeating our mistakes over and over again without realizing we are indeed repeating our mistakes. And it takes a while, takes a lot of effort from good-natured and well-intended people to then correct those mistakes. So this is a kind of cautionary tale, if you will, but also an inspiration. First time I read Rachel Carson's book, or at least came across parts of it, was almost a couple of decades ago, maybe 15, 20 years ago. And I revisited it about 2 or 3 years ago, and I stumbled across it in a different context. And again, that's when kind of in my head, the connection was made between light pollution and the basic logic about what is wrong with how we try to solve our problems. In the context of pesticides back then, in the context of artificial light at night now. A couple of months ago, or maybe a little longer, about 6 months ago, maybe less than that, like 3 or 4 months ago, I stumbled across another book, which again, many of you might be familiar with, is by Doug Tallamy, about what we are doing to our front yards and backyards and our neighborhoods in the name of, again, who knows what exactly. Like, why are we, that's one of the frustrating parts about some of these things, that why are we doing this? And there doesn't seem to be a simple answer except, well, that's what we've been doing for the past 20 years or 30 years, so we keep doing it. And again, to distill this down to the simplest possible one-word description of what this book, or what the basic idea of what Doug Tallamy is proposing is, let's get rid of lawns. And again, I'm simplifying and I'm generalizing and maybe overextending the point. But the idea, again, is, why do we have lawns? What purpose does that serve in our natural world? And again, most of you are probably familiar with this, is that, it's very counterproductive. It is really bad for biodiversity, which is a common theme between what Carson was saying back then and what Tallamy is saying now. And again, you can make that connection to light pollution, is that light pollution is really, really having a bad effect on biodiversity, on the ecological stability of our environment. And so we can make similar points again regarding that. And both Silent Spring and Nature's Best Hope are popular level readable books, but there isn't an equivalent of that. There are a couple, but they've become a little dated, as the one I've shown over here, which is not a popular level book. It has kind of technical papers that it's very readable, but technical level papers on the ecological consequences of artificial light at night. And this is from the mid 2000s, so almost 20 years old. But the overall point remains the same, just like Rachel Carson's book is 60 years old, but the point remains the same because it's well thought out. It's a very scientific, rational way of looking at things and looking at things long term rather than immediate solutions to problems. So this is the scope, or this is where I want you to kind of slot this problem in your head. So if you're, if you understand the basic logic behind what is Rachel Carson's basic point, yeah, the specific kind of target of what's wrong is pesticides. Or in the case of Talamy, it is how are we managing our green spaces around our own houses, for example. And a couple of things from Talamy's book that I would like to point out is he mentions at the end of the first or the second chapter that we have problems regarding our lawns, and he says that part of the problem is because of two primary missteps, and I'm quoting now, two primary missteps in these early years of biological conservation. The first and the most serious has been to assume that people and biodiversity cannot coexist. And again, that word biodiversity shows up. And again, you can replace one or two words here and apply it to the light pollution context, which is, for example, the first and most serious problem is misstep is to assume that people and natural darkness cannot exist at the same time. There is nothing in literature, there's nothing in research we have done that suggests that darkness immediately leads to some sort of problems for human beings to exist. We have existed in natural darkness for millions of years, and there is life in general, that is, and humans have since the advent of humanity until 100 years ago. And now suddenly we can't live without artificial light. Doesn't make any sense. And the second misstep is to leave conservation to the conservationists, that tiny community of trained ecologists who are specialized in the sciences of conservation, restoration, reclamation, and ecological sustainability. It's not that we do not need these people and their knowledge and the knowledge that they generate. We do, and we need more of them, Talamy says. And yet, every person on Earth depends on the quality of the ecosystem for his or her continual existence, and therefore each one of us, not just the scientists, carries an inherent responsibility for good Earth stewardship. And again, I want to argue that that good Earth stewardship includes taking care of natural ambience, natural conditions in the nighttime environment, even though it may be slightly inconvenient for us. Maybe, I would argue it isn't, but even if you make the argument, oh, we do need light for certain purposes, we can do that in a more responsible way, because the default should be to maintain natural ambience, because it's not just us that depend on that natural darkness. We can go inside our bedroom and pull down our dark out blinds and turn off all the lights and sleep in our nice houses and apartments. What about all the other animals and plants and insects and migrating birds and all that do not have that luxury and then are exposed to this artificial light that we are pumping out into the nighttime environment for, again, who knows what reason. So again, I want to put you, I want to invite you to kind of put this in that context. Okay, so I have kind of three chapters, if we will, as was mentioned in my bio. I'm a big Quentin Tarantino fan, so I like the chapter idea, and I jump around a little bit in the chronology because there is no linear way of explaining or describing some of these things. Some of these have to be done in parallel, or one step here, two steps there in this facet or aspect, and then you move on from there. And so I want to impress on you the value of darkness at night. And I want to kind of embed in your head a few points that, again, some of you are probably familiar with. One is that blue light is a trigger for most living organisms that it is daytime. And so anytime blue light goes into your optical organ, whatever organism you are, animal, even plants, birds, insects, whatever, blue light going into your system tells you it's daytime, and your body then reacts differently to that. As against darkness, for example. Your heart rate goes up, your blood pressure is slightly higher, you're extremely alert, you're looking for food, you're watching against predators. All these are automatically triggered because of the entry of blue light into your system. As the sun gets lower into the sky and is either rising or setting in the evening, of course, the intensity of light changes. You have, it gets a little darker, but the flavor, the texture of the color of the light also changes. It moves towards amber and yellow colored light. Again, you're familiar with this. And again, that triggers in our bodies, humans, other animals, plants, triggers hormones of various kinds, chemicals of various kinds that lower your blood pressure, lower your heart rate, calm you down, saying, okay, it's okay now, it's nighttime, or it's getting close to nighttime, you should settle down and get ready to retire and get some rest. And then, of course, if you're lucky enough to live in a really dark place with minimal light pollution, you can then enjoy the darkness in all its glory. And again, I put darkness in quotes for a specific reason. If any one of you has ever actually been in a place where there isn't any artificial light, pitch darkness, middle of Nevada somewhere, middle of Utah somewhere, in one of the Dakotas somewhere where there's really no light for miles and miles and miles around you, you will notice that it's not pitch dark. If it is actually no artificial light, within 10 or 15 minutes of you going out of your tent or whatever, or looking away from your phone or whatever, you look around, you can pretty much see everything. You can't recognize people, but you can tell there's a person there. You can tell there's a tree there. You can tell that there's a rock there. You can tell, oh, there's a deer or something moved over there. You can tell. There isn't any pitch darkness. This is a myth that is created. And part of it is because of the light, artificial light glares in your eye and then actually makes your vision poorer as a result. There is no actual darkness in terms of pitch dark. You can see just fine without any light at night. And so you have darkness, but nevertheless, that level of low level intensity, very little color, most of this, this is an image taken on a camera, so you can see some colors here. You just perceive it as black and white, and very low level of light. And that's what I've shown here on this plot. Okay, don't worry about the details. The vertical axis is the amount of light that is in the ambient environment. And the horizontal axis here is how high is the sun in the sky. So 90 degrees here means the sun is practically overhead. This vertical line SS is sunset. So the sun's right on the horizon here at 0 degrees. And then negative 90 means the sun is on the opposite side of the earth. It's the middle of the night for us. And this dark, heavy black line shows us the ambient level of illumination, incredibly high during daytime for the most part, starts falling off around sunset and dips significantly within about an hour, hour and a half of sunset. You get to astronomical twilight. That's what that AT is, where it's now nighttime. If you have cloud cover, of course, it isn't as bright as it is on a clear day, and same also at night. Overcast nights are supposed to be darker because, like I mentioned earlier, starlight is enough for the human eye to be able to see reasonably well around you. And then, of course, if the moon is up, then the moon illuminates the sky. And so it's a little brighter at night. But look at these numbers. These are powers of 10. So it's not going as 1, 2, 3, 4. It's going as 1, 10, 100, 1,000, 1, 0.1, 0.01. You see the difference between nighttime and daytime is almost a factor of 100 million in this scale. Considering how bright it is during the day, is almost 100 million times fainter than that at nighttime. That is the natural cycle of things. Even when a full moon is out, it's almost 1,000,000 times less bright than daytime. So that's what your sky then is supposed to look like. But what happens is, because of light pollution, because of light going up into the sky every which way, now you have this kind of curtain on top of the sky, where the sky, where there are no stars, is no longer black in color. It is either gray. In some cases, if you're in downtown Chicago or downtown even St. Louis or Kansas City, the sky is almost white in color. Like, it's not white, but it's like as close to it as you can get without it actually being white. And obviously then it obscures these faint objects in the sky. And this is what most people, when you talk about light pollution, think of as light pollution. And it's not just in the center of cities and towns where you notice this. And I'll show you some data that the National Park Service has gotten for various national parks. They've done it for many other parks. I'll show you a couple of other slides later. But this is what you see. This is sky glow. And you see over here in Washington, D.C., Rock Creek Park. It's not a national park, but it's a park nevertheless. You see that the sky is essentially, it's washed out. There is no darkness there. And then if you go to Smoky Mountains, you can still see cities that are far away, Raleigh, for example, Asheville, then further down, even parts of Tennessee, you can start seeing this glow from Nashville and other towns slowly encroaching, and this has been increasing over time. So you can't say that, oh, we are in the middle of this prairie and we have no lights over here, we are fine. Well, not really, because even towns as far as 200 miles away can start degrading the quality of your sky. And then there are, of course, very isolated parts of the country like Death Valley, for example, or Chaco Culture National Historic Park in New Mexico, where you can start to see some interference here right on the horizon, but for the most part, at least most of the sky is pristine. So you can't hide anywhere anymore. These lights are just encroaching more and more into our night sky. And so instead of our night sky being yay bright during the day and kind of that dark during the night, what we have done by the introduction of artificial light is just pump up that darkness at night. It's essentially gone. And most people, of course, live in cities and towns where there are many lights. And as a consequence, most people in the United States now never experience natural darkness. They just don't. And it's not, again, not just people, like I mentioned, even if you're 200 miles away from St. Louis, 200 miles away from Kansas City, you're still going to get that glow at least 20, 30, 40 degrees above the horizon in that direction. And you've lost natural darkness. And it's, again, not just us, but other animals, plants, birds, insects, especially migratory birds, who are influenced by these sorts of things. And so light pollution is the introduction of artificial light at night. It is a form of pollution because you're contaminating, you're altering the natural state of affairs. And so strictly speaking, any artificial light that you introduce has to be considered a pollutant. Of course, we understand as rational human beings that some light is necessary in the nighttime environment because of the way our society is structured and because of the way human beings are. We care about our fellow human beings. I may not like that light, but I understand someone else may need it. And so, of course, we need to have some level of light in our nighttime environment outdoors, but the default setting should be natural darkness unless we need that light to serve a specific purpose. And if you look around us today, no one asks that question. You just install lights because that's what everyone else is doing. You don't think about the purpose of the light. You don't think about where that light needs to go. You don't think about the color of the light or the intensity. By the cheapest possible fixture that can give us the maximum bang for the buck, most lumens for the amount of dollars you put in. And that is the problem, that no one's saying we should have no light outdoors. We should have light outdoors because if it serves a specific purpose, we should have that light. But let's design our lights and let's install those lights based on those basic questions, which I will outline at night. So let's talk about the nature of artificial light at night. And that is, what are the factors that one needs to account for, and then how does that either contribute to light pollution or mitigate light pollution? So the first thing to appreciate as someone who's thinking about nighttime is, why do we need outdoor lighting? And I've listed a bunch of things here. You don't have to read all of that. But the first and the most basic point, which I've called point zero, is the basic point about outdoor light is it should make us, the purpose of the light is for us to be able to see better than what we would in the absence of that light. And I guarantee you, if you walk around your neighborhood, if you walk in downtown of whatever town is closest to you, I'll guarantee you more than 50% of the light do not even satisfy this most basic requirement of the light. It makes your seeing worse by glaring into your eye, being extremely bright, casting dark shadows because they're badly directed and all that kind of stuff. And no one questions this at the get-go. And that's the thing that we want to do. This is not hard. This is not rocket science. This is not something complicated. This is very basic. It is hiding in plain sight. And it is a product of institutional inertia rather than well thought out ideas and plans. That, oh, we need this light here to serve this purpose, and make sure let's point it this way. That kind of thought, for whatever reason, is not embedded in our kind of institutional DNA or even personal DNA, right? When you install a light outdoors on your porch, you probably didn't think through it as much. The fixture was there because when you bought the house, the fixture was there and you just installed the light there without much thought. And so that's where we need to get in and start asking these fundamental questions, which again, I'll highlight in a couple of minutes. Other purposes are enhanced safety, like I mentioned earlier, security for property, not just human beings, not just life, but property as well. Lighting can also improve the aesthetic value or aesthetic kind of beauty of certain things, like a sculpture or a garden or something like that. And of course, good lighting can also trigger economic activity by attracting people to it. Common applications are listed here, and the only thing I've bold-faced are the ones associated with the transportation industry. And the transportation industry is notoriously bad in the context of light pollution. Again, we need transportation, we need car headlights, we need street lights, we need billboards, all you can make cases for each one of these things. But again, we have to try and do it wisely. We have to try and do it in a more responsible way is kind of the point. Different flavors of light pollution. Again, most of you are familiar with this. I'm going to skip through it pretty quickly. There's direct glare that I mentioned earlier. Anyone who has driven a car on a single lane road and the other car is a truck with the high beams on knows what I'm talking about, what direct glare is. There is so much light in the environment, but because it's badly directed, it's going straight into your eye, it makes your visual acuity much worse than in the absence of light. If you had no light whatsoever, you'd be able to see better than having those lights glare into your eye. Sky glow is something I mentioned earlier, the most common, most intuitive manifestation of light pollution. Glare is increasingly becoming that because of LEDs being so directional. And then light trespass is, again, something you're familiar with, where light is going where it doesn't need to go. So you have your neighbor's garage light, which gets triggered because of motion sensor, or is just on for whatever reason, and is shining straight into your bedroom window. That's light trespass. Street lights are increasingly doing this as well. It's a common complaint I hear from people. The other thing is the color of the light is important as well. And we don't quite have the time to go into all its glorious and gory details. But again, remember that thing that I mentioned earlier. Blue light triggers daytime reaction from biological creatures, most biological creatures. Blue light goes in. If they see blue light, immediately they think it's daytime and your body reacts accordingly, which is bad for us. Humans as well as other animals. And so you want to avoid blue light. So if you want to take one kind of golden rule out of this particular slide, it is avoid or minimize the amount of blue light in your environment, both indoors and outdoors, and you'll be better off. There is a way in which you can kind of quantify this blue light. It is not a perfect scale. Ideally, we want to move away from this color temperature scale, but we're kind of stuck with it for now. And so general rule of thumb, go below 2700 Kelvin. When you go to the store and buy a light bulb, they usually have these lighting facts. Go below 2700, and then also check how many lumens you want. You can look up lumens for various purposes. If I want it as a table lamp, if I want it as a night lamp, if I want it as a back porch, if I want to be able to read, if I'm watching TV, what kind of light, how much light do I need in my ambient environment, that sort of thing. You can look up and you can accordingly buy how many lumens you want. Like I mentioned earlier, the color temperature is just a crude way of quantifying the amount of blue light. What you really need is information about how much blue light you have. So these are what are called spectra or spectrum of light. There are special devices that do this. Unfortunately, the lighting industry doesn't provide this information, but I will have links for you where you can buy light bulbs that have minimal amounts of blue light in them if you are so inclined, if you want to buy those. I'll show you that. But this is the kind of information we, Dark Sky International in particular, and the American Astronomical Society is pushing for, is to provide how much blue light is present in whatever light bulb you're buying. The Europeans have this. The Europeans, in Europe, if you go to buy a light bulb, the light bulb manufacturer is required to state how much percent of the total light output is below a certain wavelength. Wavelength is essentially the, quantifying the color. So anything below 500 nanometers is considered bad. And so in Europe, they will say 5% of the light is below 500 nanometers, or 3% is below 500 nanometers or whatever. We don't have that yet, but there are ways in which we can find this out. And I know which light bulbs have the minimal amounts of blue light, and I'll send you the links for that later. So fine, that's what light pollution is, and that's how it fits into the kind of grand scheme of things of conservation and restoration and that sort of thing. How do we actually reduce this? And this is the simplest part of my talks usually, because it's so simple, because it's so intuitive. The one kind of subtle important point I want to make, and this goes beyond light pollution and dark skies, is the conflict between efficiency and overconsumption. LED lights are much more efficient than, say, incandescent lights or other kinds of lights you've seen before. Sodium, high pressure sodium, low pressure sodium is actually efficiency-wise is actually comparable to LEDs. But the problem is this: when you make something more efficient, doesn't automatically mean you reduce consumption. And that is part of, a paradoxical situation where you more efficient you make something, effectively that means in our capitalistic society, making something more efficient effectively means you made it cheaper. And so what happens as a consequence of making something cheaper is people tend to overconsume it. This is just human tendency, where you used to have one light bulb when you had incandescent lights, and now you replaced it with an LED, which is 90% more efficient than the incandescent. You no longer use only one light, you use 5 lights, you use even 10 lights, because it doesn't cost you anything. You will start noticing, and I have here in the small town of Kirksville where I am, some of the lights are just perpetually on all day and all night. They just don't turn it off anymore because they're so efficient, doesn't cost as much. And so where you used to have a given light at a given location on for maybe 8 hours at night, now it's on for 24 hours, and they no longer have just one light, they have 3 or 4 lights now. And so we are only consuming more, and our overall carbon footprint, our overall savings, because of the introduction of LED lights, are practically zero. In fact, in the last 5 years, the money that we are spending on lighting has actually gone up, according to several papers that have been published, meaning it's actually turning out to be somewhat counterproductive. So that's something to keep in mind. But like I said, how do you combat light pollution? It is basically you follow these 5 principles for responsible outdoor lighting. Dark Sky International and the Illuminating Engineering Society have articulated this for more than 10 years now. Use light only when it is needed. Target the light, so your fixture should be such that the light goes where it needs to go. Use appropriate levels. I like to use the word appropriate rather than low, because sometimes you do need a lot of light. If it's a ballpark, if it's a stadium and you're playing baseball, you need a lot of light. You need to see the ball, and so on and so forth. And control, meaning see if you can have motion sensors and timers on it, and then use warm colored light. That's the jargon that's used. But basically, again, in your head, just say minimize the amount of blue light in your lights, and you will be better off. That's it. Technically speaking, we have all of this. We have good fixtures in the market. You can buy it from Home Depot in a couple of, you can go and buy it in half an hour if that's what you wanted to do. We have amber colored lights, which have minimal amount of blue light in them. We even have like soft white lights, which have some blue light, but relatively less amounts of blue light. All of these things already exist. And yet, people just helter-skelter install lights facing sideways, facing up into the sky. And not just random people who might not know enough. Cities are doing this. Businesses are doing this. Universities are doing this. And that's the frustrating part. And that's where we need to put our foot down and say, okay, that's enough of this. Let's try and fix this if we can. Okay, so here are some pictures of good and kind of bad lighting. Here's one from Texas where they had a light like this and they just replaced it with this. If you want the light to go onto this porch over here, you're getting just as much light, if not a little bit more than this, and very little to no glare at all. Here's a nice garden lighting where the lights are, you can't even see the light fixture, you can barely see them because the light's so well directed to the ground, you don't have to see anything else. All you want to see is the ground so you can walk safely and don't stumble across as you come home or are leaving home at night. Beautifully done, very little light leaking out elsewhere. Here's more examples again from Texas and Arizona. This is a Walmart in Arizona. I was so surprised to see even Walmarts follow the local, not just follow the local laws, but do it really well. Beautiful lights, whatever lights are under this awning so that, they don't go up into the sky, well shielded amber colored lights. The Walmart sign itself is blue, so Flagstaff was not able to win that battle. So you see the blue reflected of this white car a little bit. But if that's the price you have to pay, that's fair enough. This is an oil refinery down in, or oil tanks, I suppose, down again in Texas near Big Bend National Park. And again, you can get the oil industry to adhere to good lighting practices. I think you can get our towns to do that. You know what I mean? So it's possible. It can be done. But the challenge remains that how do we put a dollar amount on, um, on the ability for me to see the Milky Way from my backyard. We can't quite do that. We don't, our society is not designed that way. And so that's the challenge for us kind of naturalists and dark sky advocates is how do we make our case that this is important for the sake of itself, not because it saves you money, not because it is, it's good in the long run because it saves you money again. Yes, it will save you money, but it is important for its own sake rather than for these kind of materialistic considerations. So let me take a few minutes to describe what we, Dark Sky Missouri, are doing, and then I'll probably need 5 more minutes. I know I'm running slightly over time here to talk about what are the bad effects of lighting to various life forms. Our goal is to promote quality lighting, promote and protect our natural environment and educate people about light pollution. So that's all fairly straightforward. And I'm going to leave this here just for a second. You don't have to read all this, but we can revisit this later in the Q&A, where what I would like from the Prairie Foundation as an organization and individuals, members of the Prairie Foundation and other people who are here is, how do we get these 5 principles formally included in advocacy, in implementation of various things that Prairie Foundation does, or your contacts with DNR or Missouri DNR and MDC and all that, is to just kind of have their buildings, their structures on various prairies that we have in Missouri, all be compatible with these 5 principles. That's something we can work on together. I think it will be a mutually beneficial thing to do, and I think that's something that is doable. Individually, I ask you to become a member of Dark Sky Missouri because we need members, we need volunteers, we need people to help us with some of the things I've listed here. We are a small organization. We are only 5 years old, and the first 2 or 3 years were essentially washed out by COVID. We're just kind of finding our feet. And we have a dark sky training program, which you can find on the website, which is linked later in the PowerPoint. So you can get some more additional training, become a dark sky advocate, and help us with some of these things. Okay, I'm gonna skip these. So why do all this? And there's a whole industry of papers, articles, etc. about, okay, it causes some glare, you can't see the stars, big deal. Why should I care? Why should anyone care? And the short answer, like I argued right at the beginning, was light pollution, just as pesticides are very immediate. Light pollution is kind of a slow train wreck. The lawns are a good, better kind of comparison because, yeah, if you have a front lawn, you can't say it's my front lawn killed biodiversity in Kirksville. You can't make that argument. But if everyone is doing it, then it's a problem because now you're cutting off natural habitats from each other because they have no way to go from place A to place B because you've essentially created a desert in between, and bad lighting contributes to that. So why combat light pollution? On one slide, I've tried to kind of summarize this. I'll go into the bird migration part a little bit more, depending on how much time I have, which is it affects humans, obviously, with the circadian rhythm. We're familiar with this. But the main impact that to me is the ecological impact. It's the impact on pollinators, it's the impact on birds, it's the impact on wildlife. And of course, bad lighting is bad for the environment because it does increase greenhouse emissions. We are burning more energy to generate a certain amount of light because more than half that light gets wasted. It goes where it doesn't need to go. And obviously, it has an impact on stargazing and astronomy. And the prairies in the Midwest in Missouri are a fundamental part of this because they form essentially the playground in which our kind of food chain operates, right? I mean, it provides the nutrients, it recycles nutrients, and it attracts pollinators, it attracts migratory birds, it attracts wildlife, which then kind of, move these nutrients that are necessary for us to sustain ourselves in our ecosystem. And like I mentioned, yeah, the prairies, the wilderness areas themselves may not have a lot of lights, but these neighboring towns and cities and all that are contaminating our night sky. And here's another example of a similar pictures I showed earlier, where sky glow is just taking over. Here's Golden Gate in California, clearly completely lost, and even Smoky Mountains, which I did show you earlier, and then the two better sites that I showed you earlier. So that's just to drive home the point. And now there is increasing research about what kinds of lighting, what kinds of artificial light affect what kinds of organisms. And so again, I have linked these papers at the end of the, on a slide at the end of the presentation. There's increasing research that is showing that birds, fish, bats, insects, pollinators, etc., are all affected by light pollution in a negative way for the most part. There are some organisms that are actually benefiting from light pollution, but very few. And again, that's predatory in nature. Plants, the research is a little more kind of behind the curve, if you will, but you can see clear examples. This is a soybean field. Guess where the lights are, right? You can't see the lights themselves. You can't see the light fixtures on the highway, but you can clearly see where most of the lighting are, where I don't know if this is a good thing or a bad thing, but it doesn't look like a good thing, but it has clearly affected the development of these soybean plants based on where the lights are. So again, one could argue whether this is good or bad or indifferent, but there's clearly an effect from lighting. Here's another example of a tree in mid to late fall. And again, you see the presence of this light has affected how the tree is behaving. Again, you can argue whether this is good or bad, but there's clear indication that there are effects on it. Pollinators, I mentioned earlier, all of us in the Midwest know this. You go out on a hot, humid day, you think, okay, I'll just kind of watch the sunset or something, or read a book outside when it's gotten a little cooler. You turn on the lights and you get swamped with all sorts of insects and bugs, and it's annoying to us. But this is happening all the time. Look at the amount of lights we already have outdoors, and these insects should be in the fields. They should be mingling amongst the flowers. They should be pollinating and doing their thing rather than buzzing around a light and then effectively getting eaten or die of exhaustion or get eaten by birds or lizards or the like. So clearly a problem for pollinators. And so that's what I've described over here. And you can take time-lapse pictures to just show how pollinators or insects in general, some of which are pollinators, are attracted to light. And this is not good. Again, pesticides and light pollution, same effect on these critters, if you will, essentially leading to their extermination. Okay, quickly, I'll take maybe 5 minutes to talk about bird migration. All of you are probably familiar with some of these, and here's a nice little animation showing the migratory patterns based on time of the year. So you have your spring, summer migration, and then you'll start seeing fall migration soon enough. And billions of birds are up above our skies. Remember, again, in Missouri, we have our two mighty rivers, the Mississippi and the Missouri, which essentially are funnels. That's where, life forms are attracted to water for obvious reasons. And most migratory birds are nighttime migratory birds because it's more efficient to fly at night. It's a little safer and it costs less energy because it tends to be cooler. And so what I want to show you is, again, a complicated plot, but basically the level of exposure of migratory birds to artificial light as a function of either spring or fall. And here's spring and fall. And what I really want to point out here, again, it's complicated here, is Kansas City and St. Louis are among the worst cities. And compared to Chicago, compared to New York, St. Louis and Kansas City are actually relatively small. And so even despite that, Kansas City and St. Louis are in the top 10 cities for exposure, danger of exposure to artificial light in both fall and spring migratory periods. And so again, the details here you can read later, but the point that was startling to me, the point that I can barely believe, I'm trying to find it, is this. that according to FLAP, which is a Canadian organization, 25 million birds die due to bird collisions with buildings in Canada. And according to the Smithsonian, that number is astronomically bigger in the United States. It's close to 600 million birds. 600 million birds die every year in the United States because of collisions with human-made structures. Now, most of these structures are small 1-2 story buildings because there's just so many of them. And then the high-rise building, and pardon my language here, but the greatest bang for the buck is these high-rise buildings, because even one of those buildings can kill many, many more birds than hundreds of smaller 1-2 story houses that we have in the countryside. So yeah, raw numbers, the number of killing bird fatalities are higher for smaller buildings, but in terms of killing efficiency, again, pardon my language, high-rise buildings are terrible. And part of that is because high-rise buildings tend to have a lot of glass windows. They're, of course, higher where the birds tend to fly more, especially migratory birds. And there have been several cases of bird deaths that have occurred because of collisions. And here's a couple of pictures I want to show. I know I'm stretching my time over here. Is because of artificial light that goes up into the sky, instead of the birds being basically dark up there and hence safe, you can actually trace their paths in the sky with long exposure. I know this picture is a little dark, but you can see some of this. This is from Texas. This is from my university where we have lights going up into the sky. You can see some of the glare from the lights on the edge of the picture there. And here's a beautiful picture from MissouriSkies.org. It's a wonderful website. I strongly recommend you. It has a Facebook group as well. Just look up Missouri Skies. Just absolutely wonderful pictures. And I took it from there. Is the middle pattern that you're seeing are migratory birds or birds of some kind flying at night, thinking evolution from an evolutionary point of view, they're doing it at night because it's supposed to be dark. There shouldn't be that light. Their belly should not be illuminated at all because it's supposed to be dark. And instead, they are basically standing out against the somewhat dark sky. And of course, you can see snow on the ground. So the double reflection from the snow is making the situation worse. But these birds are now at risk, and they shouldn't be, for two reasons. They're attracted to the light from cities where most of our human-made structures are, hence increasing the probability of colliding with them. And they are open to predators now because the predators can actually see them, which they otherwise wouldn't have been able to if this light was not shining on their belly. So it's kind of a double whammy for these poor birds. The last thing I will show you, and then I'll get to the concluding slides, is this pattern that you're seeing here. This is how bright the sky is at night. The higher means how it's darker. Brighter skies are down here, darker skies are up there. This is from Grand Gulf State Park. And you see this beautiful pattern, kind of oscillatory pattern, which comes from the moon phase. The sky gets really dark when you have a new moon and gets relatively bright when you have full moon. And you have this monthly pattern. So there are about 12 cycles over here. And this is for the same time period, more or less that 1 year, 2021, from the city of Ozark. So note firstly, the city of Ozark doesn't get anywhere remotely as dark as a natural sky does, like in Grand Gulf. And note that that pattern is more or less gone. I mean, you basically have twilight-like conditions basically throughout. Much brighter twilight, slightly dimmer twilight. There is no natural darkness. And that beautiful sinusoidal pattern is gone. And these are the patterns of moon cycles and moon phases that migratory birds use to travel from point A to point B. They are, as far as we know, at least some species of birds are familiar with moon patterns, but that pattern is now gone. Hence, the birds are confused. They get attracted to the light. And like I mentioned earlier, you know the rest of the story. So we're making a bad situation worse for these birds. Okay, I have, here's a gory example. And again, pardon if I kind of shock you with some of this. One incident in Chicago from last year where more than 500 birds died by colliding from one building in just one night. Yes, there were other contributing factors, the wind pattern, this, that, and the other, but the birds should never have been there to begin with. They were there because they were most likely attracted to the light from Chicago. So here are my book recommendations. These are the books that are lying on my table. I've read parts of them. A couple of them I have finished reading. currently reading Nature's Best Hope. I've read Carlson's book. I've read most of Ecological Consequences because it's not a book, it's a bunch of papers. So I've read through some of those. I haven't quite started Darkness Manifesto yet, but that would be my recommendation. And I have a bunch of links here that might be of interest to you. So again, you will have access to this PowerPoint, so you should be able to go through these links as you want. And I have a couple of 6 things that you could do relatively easily. Again, it escalates a little bit, but you can do relatively easily. So you can click on these links as well and see what that's about. But I'll leave you with this slide, which is basically a summary of what I've tried to get across. And again, I will offer an apology. Some of you have heard this similar talks before. It's always a question of what you want to emphasize or not. And I've tried to balance slightly technical knowledge with more general knowledge. But what I would like to say is that I want this to be the start of a conversation, not like, oh, now I know everything about light pollution. I don't, you don't, no one does. We are all trying to learn and figure out our way in understanding the problem. Like I said, the technical solutions are already known. The question is, how do we get others to implement this? First, start with yourself. Try and do this in your own back porch. If you have access to another building, see if you can fix that and slowly move out from there. Okay, I think I'll stop at this point and invite questions and comments and so on and so forth. Thank you everyone for your time.
Thank you very much. As I was looking at some of your slides, the first word that came to my mind was how illuminating it was. And then I realized that wasn't the best word. So smart illumination, right? That's what we're going for. We do have a number of questions. So thank you very much for addressing these questions. Tony asks, how significantly does elevation change over long distance affect light pollution? And I think this question came in when you were showing the slide of light pollution from cities 200 miles away.
Yeah, so I would say, of course, if you are in the city, the light pollution is all around you. And as you start moving away, in the direction of the city, you will keep seeing that sky, sky brightness. I would say if you are within 20 miles from the city, you still have light pollution overhead. You just don't see it as well because your eyes are not that sensitive, but it's there. It's obscuring your view of the stars, and it's affecting other life forms because they are not able to see the stars, or they are in that kind of mild twilight, because you do need darkness, right? When you really go to bed, you want to make sure your room is completely dark. I know some people like to have some light and all that kind of stuff, but usually you cover your eyes or you look the other way or you have a blanket on your head or something. So, but the animals out there don't have that luxury. So I would say within 20, 30 miles, you're still living within light polluted skies. Now, if you go beyond, say, 50 miles-ish, now it becomes more directional. So if you're south of town, then you can say, oh, my northern sky is light polluted up to about 45 degrees above the horizon. If you go to like the 200 miles that was shown, again, it depends on what you want to define as sky glow, like how bad is the light pollution. But you could say that even 200 miles away, you still are getting light in your ambient environment because of that sources of light 200 miles away. Now, your eye may not be able to perceive it because, unless you look in that direction, if you look in the opposite direction, you may think it is fine, but it's not. It's still not pristine darkness. So I don't know the exact numbers of how you can quantify it, but I would say within 20 to 30 miles, you're certainly still within the light pollution kind of light dome. As you go farther than 50 to 70 miles or up beyond, then it becomes a little directional that, okay, it's fine towards the south, but it's not so good towards the north because the city is towards the north.
Thank you. We had a couple comments asking if you could put back the to-do slide. And I think you said you're sharing the entire PowerPoint,
Yes.
but if you could maybe put that slide back up, that might help answer some questions. And there was one question from Linda, and she asked about examples of planning and zoning development codes that are in place to abate or minimize or prevent light pollution. I know you mentioned, you showed the slide of the Walmart in Flagstaff, so I'm assuming Flagstaff has, could you
Yeah.
talk about that a bit, their ordinance and
Yeah.
other examples?
Sure. So Flagstaff is the first dark sky city. It's been a dark sky city for several decades now, and they're way ahead of the curve. In fact, they have something called the Flagstaff solution that they are advocating for, which is personally, from my perspective, a little too strict, a little impractical to implement because it's so rigid in terms of what's acceptable or not. But certainly there's a lot to learn from Flagstaff. Um, Flagstaff has other incentives, though. They have lots of telescopes. They are high elevation, tourist destination, and one of the greatest tourist destinations in the world, right? We're not talking about, with due respect, places in the Midwest, because people come from all over the world to go to the Grand Canyon, which is less than 100 miles from Flagstaff. Um, so they have other incentives, and so it's a little impractical. So we do have on Dark Sky, Missouri, we do have a list of laws and ordinances in Missouri, in and around Missouri, so in our Midwest region. I will say that now I'll put my Dark Sky Missouri, Dark Sky International hat on, and American Astronomical Society hat on, to say that we are actually working on a model lighting ordinance that will be released imminently. It should be released really around now, but maybe, there's always last minute glitches. So we, in the next month or two, or certainly before the end of the year, we will have that model lighting ordinance for small towns and for bigger much bigger towns, and then we're also working on something similar for university campuses. So so there are some examples out there, but I think something better, and what we're trying to tell Dark Sky and AAS is to come up with a template that is, you can do some mixing and matching. It's not as rigid as the Flagstaff version, because like I said, if you are a real tourist destination, if you have dark skies and low humidity, high elevation, where you can attract astro tourists, go for Flagstaff, because that there is other incentives. You can compromise with people. You can force people to implement those more rigid solutions, because you're going to get tax dollars, you're going to get tourist dollars from it. We can't quite make that argument because we are not high elevation pretty much anywhere in Missouri. Our skies are 70% of the time cloudy. Our humidity is at best 70%. It's always above it. So we can't make the astrotourism argument. We have to make the arguments based on the ecological factors that I've tried to emphasize, right? The bird migration, the pollinators, the direct glare, that sort of thing. And so we have to write our ordinances accordingly, and you can only keep them this rigid because people are going to say, oh, if the light bothers you, just pull the curtain, which is not a good argument, but it is at least an argument. And so, yeah, there's more forthcoming is what I can say. What I'll do is I haven't put a link for laws and ordinances in the links that I had at the bottom, but I'll add that one. So you can look it up, or just go to darkskymissouri.org, which is linked later, and then just go to one of the tabs and you'll find laws and ordinances there.
Thank you very much. We did have comments from folks who are interested in encouraging local officials to take action, so that template of ordinance will be very helpful.
Yeah.
Another question, and the light pollution or the light trespass, it's almost like a private property issue in a way, so you could perhaps make that argument. And Trevor asks, how do you suggest approaching neighbors whose light trespasses onto my property?
I think the first thing is to see if they're reasonable people with whom you can have a rational, good faith discussion. There's no substitute to that. And that's the easiest, least painful way of doing that for everyone concerned, because then it's mutual. You respect each other and understand each other's basic points. My guess is the person asking the question has tried this, or already knows that these are not people I want to talk to for whatever reason, because they've shown tendencies that they're not going to listen to me anyway, that kind of thing. that becomes tricky then, because it depends then how your city approaches these sorts of issues. Because, the example I give is that many cities have, for example, sound ordinances, where they say there's a curfew on sound, loud sounds after 11 o'clock at night or midnight or whatever. And most cities are actually not that bad in implementing that. Meaning, if your neighbor's playing really loud music at 2 o'clock in the morning, and you call the cops, they'll usually show up and knock on the door and ask them to tone it down. Um, if their light is shining into your yard and you call someone, they're probably not going to show up or laugh it off, or ask you to look the other way or get a blackout curtain or whatever. And because there is no real law, or very loosely worded laws about light trespass. And that's why one of the things that I've listed here on the list in light blue is engage lawmakers and policymakers to actually put this in the books. Many times, like the city of Kirksville actually does have a couple of kind of sub clauses, if you will, in nuisance bylaws, where they say light should end at the lot line, meaning at the end of your property, your light shouldn't go beyond that, but they don't enforce it, and they have no mechanism of enforcing it. And so it's really tricky, and that's why this has to be approached from both directions. Like, we need to get people all on board just to kind of show them. And the other is good. The other thing one can do is show them good lighting, like install good lighting in your own yard and say, hey, look, I can see my yard just fine. I can see it from wherever I'm standing. I can see my yard, and that light is not going into your yard or the other neighbor's yard. And it's doing everything the light needs to do without bothering others. And you just then appeal to their good nature, saying, I'm not asking you to change it right now because I know it's going to cost money and effort, but the next time you buy your fixture, whenever this thing falls apart, uh, or you're renovating your house or whatever, then just, just maybe implement this. So yeah, it is tricky.
That makes me wonder if, if a person offered a gift of a,
If you're really up for that, then yes, that could be an option as well, saying, I know someone who will come and fix it for you. And let's go to Walmart, let's go to Home Depot, let's go wherever, and let's get a fixture that we both agree on. So at least, give me an hour of your time and I'll take care of the rest. So yeah, you can make that, again, good faith offer, but then, if you're willing to take that up, then of course that will be good. And and it's another thing is, if you have some sort of HSA, or if you live out in the country and there's a street and there are 10 houses on the street or whatever, do a nighttime party if you have a telescope, or ask a local astronomer to come do a nighttime thing for you. They'll set up a couple of telescopes. They'll talk about things. Most astronomers will talk about some sort of light pollution, or they'll tell, hey, maybe you should turn off your porch light because we can't see properly. And if it's part of something communal you're doing, it gets the message across without you being necessarily pointing it out, because you see, oh, my light is actually bothering other people. So yeah, you can do those sorts of indirect things.
yeah, have a neighborhood, a stargazing party, and then, yeah, good idea. There's some specific questions here also about, I think there was a question about, I think you had a link of information about the optimal kinds of lights to buy, or could you maybe go to that slide, or there were some.
I don't have a direct link to it, but one of the best websites for that is the Flagstaff website.
Okay.
And I can actually just open it for you. You guys can see my screen, right?
Yes.
So if you go to Flagstaff website, the website has been designed 30 years ago and they haven't changed much. So it's a little old fashioned, but it's one of those websites that it is good because doesn't have too many glitzy, glamorous things on the website. They actually have what you really need. So if you go to resources, dark sky residential lighting products, and they have a whole list, including on Amazon. So, and then they give you examples of lights. And I will also, I don't know if I actually have None of these are information based, but I'll put in a couple of links for lights that I use. I'm not necessarily recommending those. I'm just saying I use these lights in my house, and I'll leave it up to you if you want to follow that. But I would say investigate the Flagstaff website. A lot of good stuff there.
Thank you. And if you could leave that slide up because someone else wanted to see the links, other links as well.
Sure.
Question about, are there any dark sky parks in Missouri?
Yes, there is a dark sky park, but it's an urban night sky place, which means the sky itself is not very dark, but they're implementing all the good lighting policies. It's in St. Louis. It's called Stacy Park. They have nighttime programs there, I think once every month or two. But it's an urban, what's called an urban night sky place where they have very few lights, if any, on the park premises itself, and they are all dark sky compatible. But the sky is St. Louis sky, so you can't, it's not necessarily giving you a beautiful sky. What I will point out though is the south of our state is excellent in terms of light pollution. We actually have a dark sky festival there on October 25th and 26th. Here's the QR code for it. I can also post the link in the chat for Dark Sky Festival. Give me just 1 second. And that would be a good opportunity for you guys to come down and take a look at the night sky. I would say the couple of state parks in the south of our state, Grand Gulf, Echo Bluff, Big Springs, excellent dark skies. It's something that you should all enjoy at some point or the other. I'm posting a link in the chat to the Dark Sky Missouri page, and if you scroll down, you can register for attending this if you're considering going, or you can just bookmark this and then do it later. But that would be a good opportunity. We will be there. Lots of other people will be there. Naturalists are going to be there. Sierra Club, Audubon, and others. There's going to be rafting. There's going to be all sorts of fun activities on the river, and we'll set up telescopes and whatnot, and basically enjoy each other's company and talk about night sky stuff, dark sky stuff, and whatnot. So
Wonderful. Thank you for that. I think that when you can get certain groups on board, they can serve as role models for others. And there's another question about sports playing fields and the amount of light that they use. Do you know of any stadiums or other playing fields that have optimal, lighting that could serve as examples for others?
yeah, there are some that are what we'll call dark sky compatible, but the one company that does a lot of this work is Musco, which is actually based up here in Iowa, just an hour north of where I am. And Musco is a leader in responsible lighting. They've been involved with dark sky for decades now, and they have several facilities that they don't make all their stadiums dark sky friendly. It depends on what they are asked to do. They have the technology to do it, and they're leaders in it. And many of their stadiums are extremely well lit, and that's the power of LED lights. Like I was saying, LED lights. Let me just pull up the slide for the oil tanks. LED lights are very directional, and so if you look at, bigger, look how sharp the cutoff is of these lights. They're eliminating all these pipes and whatnot, and the tanks and whatnot, but look how dark it is just outside this, what appears to be like some sort of a fence, right? And you can achieve that with LED lighting. And so many Musco Stadium lighting, if you ask for it, if you ask that you want your lights to be that way, you can have lights that literally shine right on the playground, but not in the stands, or the playground and the stands and the bleachers, but not in the parking lot, because the parking lot has its own lights. or it goes all the way out to the parking lot's edge, but not onto the neighboring streets. You can design lights that way now because LED lights are very directional, as you know, right? If you hold an LED light and shine it in your eye, it's unbearable. If you're slightly off from it, you can't even see the light. So, um, so this can be done, and you can look up examples, or I can look up and post the link. But most of them are, I'm sure there are other companies that do it as well, but the most one that I'm familiar with, because they have dark sky connections, and it happens to be literally an hour north of us, is Musco Lighting. And if your community or local high school or whatever is thinking about changing their stadium lights, I would strongly recommend Musco, at least talking to them, and then you can make your own decisions. But
That's really good information. Another question about this attendee has 2 dusk to dawn lights due to a nighttime robbery. And of course, they're blue light. Are there other lights that we could have installed that would not be as harmful?
yeah, sorry, I missed that. Is that there was a blue light and there was still a robbery? Is that the point?
No, they have installed 2 dusk to dawn lights because they had a nighttime robbery.
I see. So
And
yeah, I mean, that's something that, that's always the situation. Like, would the robbery not happen if there were already lights there or not? We don't know. Our reflexive tendency, if something bad happens, is to install more lights. And sometimes that's justified, sometimes not necessarily. So it depends on the situation, depends where this is, how, what the crime rate in that neighborhood is, and that sort of thing. I've heard of cases where they had a lot of lights. There was a case here at Truman where they installed new blue-white LEDs on the side of the dorm building. They have a bike rack right under those lights. And within a week of them installing those lights, a couple of bikes were stolen. And there could be an argument to be made that, the fact that the light was shining there just told potential robbers that, oh, there are bikes over here, and oh, 2 of them are not locked or badly locked or whatever. Whereas if the light wasn't there, they wouldn't have bothered. So you could make the case either way. But again, dark sky advocates are not saying you shouldn't have light. The question is the light, that if you think there's a purpose for the light, that this light will protect this property or dissuade miscreants from getting into this region, go ahead, install the light. Just make sure then the light goes where it needs to go. Does it have to be on all the time? The most effective thing that I've heard, at least anecdotally, and there is some research to back this up as well, but especially anecdotally, is motion sensors. Because motion sensors will trigger, and they have to be proper motion sensors that don't trigger because a leaf blows, because you see that with garage lights, there's a slight stiff breeze and the light turns on because, a few branches are moved. So you need a good motion sensor. Because it then alerts people around, not just you, but just random, the cop that is standing at the, in his car, sitting in his car at the intersection. Why did that light turn on? Why is someone over there at 2 o'clock? And maybe it's deer or, just, plastic bag blowing across or whatever, but at least it got their attention. So I would say motion sensors is probably the way to go, but yes, it involves cost, it involves effort to install it and that sort of thing. But it serves both purposes. It makes it a little more secure because the light turning on triggers attention, and also maybe startles any miscreant who might be there. Oh, the light turned on. And then the light turns off after a while, which is good for, like, from a light pollution angle.
But if a person does want to have the lights on, dusk to dawn, is there what would be better than a blue light?
Oh, amber colored lights are better. But the amber colored light, there is a criticism about amber colored lights about color rendition. So blue car will basically appear black to you in amber lights. So are you concerned about that? My argument has been it doesn't matter that much, because if something bad is happening, people's memories are so unreliable in such situations that for all you know, it probably was a black car to begin with, or it was a blue car to begin with, and you said it was black, even though there was good light or whatever. So it depends. I would say, you have to make again, this depends case by case, right? What is the neighborhood? Are there other lights nearby? How crime prone this area is or not? what are the incentives for a robber to come to that neighborhood to do? There's all sorts of factors involved there, which you can't generalize. But I'd say, and that's why I always say, get the light well shielded. Okay, if the light is well shielded, meaning it is pointing straight down, it's not pointing sideways, it's not pointing up in the sky, because that doesn't serve any purpose. Literally, it doesn't serve any purpose. And in fact, it's counterintuitive, because if the glare is going into your eye, you can see less well. And then, how is that helpful to anybody? It's not. And so as long as you get it well shielded, I would say go for color temperatures below 2700 Kelvin. If you start going to color temperatures close to 2000, the light will become deep amber in color. Some people, I would say we are installing 2200 Kelvin lights on our campus. We took faculty, students for night walk. We have installed 6 of them as trial. There were at least 3 or 4 people who wrote, and then we had feedback forms that they filled up later. At least 3 or 4 people said, when we walked up to the amber lights and I saw them, I was not impressed. I did not like them. I thought they were very dim. They looked kind of odd. They looked kind of weird. They didn't look natural. But after we hung around for 5 or 10 minutes, they were fine. In fact, they were great because I started seeing better. They were not glaring into my eyes. And they were much calmer, they're warmer, they make you feel welcome rather than harsh lights. Most of you go downtown or go to some business or some neighborhood, and these bright white lights just make you feel as if you're in prison, like you're committing some crime by just being there, that all these kind of flashlights are flashing at you. The amber color lights are much warmer and much cozier, if you will, and are less intrusive. So even if some of that is shining into your window, won't bother you as much as a blue-white light will. So I strongly recommend amber lights, but it might take some getting used to, and it's a hard sell, which is very strange because about 15, 20 years ago, all our lights were amber lights and no one seemed to be bothered by them.
There are yellow light bulbs that you can buy that have been around for decades that sometimes people
bug lights, yep.
So that insects aren't attracted to them. Are those better than
those are better than the blue-white LEDs, certainly, but the critical factor, and I know it's a little hard to determine, is how much blue light do they contain? Mm-hmm. Because this light over here could appear yellow to you. Is it better than this really blue light? Yes. But are there better options? Yes. And so this light over here will appear slightly deep yellow, not quite deep orange, but it will appear kind of yellowish, in color. That would be ideal. Now, this could be rated 3000K, this could be rated 3000K. And that's why I said the color temperature is a little bit of a mixed blessing. It's an easy number to look up, but it really depends how much blue light, how much amber color light. This one's probably 4000 or even 5000K. This one's between 3 to 4000. This one's below 3000 for sure. It's probably close to 2500K if you want to generalize it. But you can rate this as 3000 and that as 3000 as well, and then it becomes a bit of a problem. So it really depends on how much blue light you have. And I know that that's not an easy answer. There's no easy answer to that, because when you pick up the light bulb at the store, it doesn't tell you that. So ask, if you're looking it up on Amazon, if it is an American company or even if it's a Chinese company, which is most likely is, if there is a way to contact them, email them and ask. They have this information. They're just not required to put it, so they don't put it. So you can do that, or I can. Let's see. You could, let's say you go to Home Depot and you have one of these lights, take a picture of that and send it to me. Because I can go to the local Home Depot. I have an instrument, in fact, it's right here. I have an instrument that measures the spectrum. And so I can test it out and tell you, yeah, this is fine. Or, oh, it contains 20% blue light, but it's okay, it's not bad, or whatever. So we'll just have to do it case by case for now. And that's why we're trying to get the lighting companies to give the spectral information, how much percentage of the light is essentially blue light or worse. We're not there yet.
Thank you. We just have 3 more questions.
Sure.
Are blinking lights, for example, at traffic lights or airports, are they?
The blinking lights, again, it's one of those things that, 10 years ago, those were just regular light bulbs blinking. They were not as sharp as LED lights are and more diffuse, and it didn't bother anyone. And now you stand at a blinking light when there's a stop sign and a blinking light, and he's like, I can't see a thing right now because I accidentally looked at that blinking light, and now I'm gonna turn left, but I'm hoping there's nothing on the road because I can't see. I know it's this is the kind of thing that you want to talk to your city administrators and say, why? It's like I was saying earlier, like the lawn situation where everyone has a lawn because everyone has a lawn, right? We're just trying to blend in. We don't want to be weird. But no one, no one has asked these fundamental questions that you changed all these lights to these incredible bright LEDs. Is it helping us drive better? Is it really making us safer, or is it just something you did because no one questioned it?
Right.
Another thing that has bothering me lately is it was raining cats and dogs when I drove here in the morning, and we are required to turn on the headlights when it is raining. When you're using wipers, you should turn on your headlights. And this was fine even 5 years ago, but now actually with high beams and LEDs, you have all this water splashing on your windscreen, on your windshield, and that light is then scattering from all these droplets here and there. It makes it makes it worse. I can see less now, even during daytime when it is raining. Forget about night. I mean, nighttime you're just hoping and praying. If it's raining and there are headlights coming your way from the opposite direction, you're just hoping there's nothing on the road. You just but but these are the kind of fundamental questions that need to be asked. That we're no longer on horse carriage here. We are no longer using incandescent light. We are no longer using diffuse light. We are using very powerful technology, which gives us incredible efficiency, but also very sharp directed lighting. And we need to change our habits accordingly. And so, anyway, don't want
Well,
to get a whole rant about it, but yeah, the point is well taken. It's hard.
well, I think the example that you're showing right now on the slide right there
Yeah,
is
that's what.
very effective because it shows that the shielded light is effective and it's also much more pleasant. And I think that, I think if officials saw paired photos like that, that would really get the message across. Just
Yeah.
two more questions. I have ring motion detected floodlights. I get insects at night that seem to be attracted to them even when the lights are off. Any thoughts?
It's the heat. They get hot, and the heat is what attracts the insects. So insects are attracted to light, but they're also attracted to heat. And so if your light is on even for like 5 minutes and it turns off, it's pretty hot, and that's going to attract the insects. I would say make it less sensitive if that helps. That it doesn't turn on, like I said, at every little gust of wind or whatever. If you have a setting that you can use. Again, it's a question of personal preference. I don't have any lights outdoors. I live out in the country though, so it's fine. But I don't have any light outdoors. There are light fixtures, but I've never installed light bulbs in them. But it's if you do need lights, again, see if you can get them amber colored and then directed down. Because I've seen my in-laws live in St. Louis, so we walk the dog around in the neighborhood, and those lights are just sideways pointing, shining into across the street into. So avoid that. Some of this you'll just have to live with. If you have an outdoor light, it is going to attract insects, and especially if it heats up, it is going to attract insects even more, even after it turns off. So, I mean, like I said, if it was me, I'll just get rid of the light. But I understand, the light is needed sometimes, and then you just have to live with the consequences a little bit.
Well, thank you, Vayu, for being so generous with your time and expertise. Many appreciative comments that have come through. So thank you very much for the incredibly important work that you're doing and for
I did
sharing.
notice a couple of questions that I would like to address because I think
Oh,
they're.
oh, sure. Oh, yes.
So one was just posted about correlation between light pollution and criminal behavior. Very minimal. The way I like to put it is the most illuminated city in the world is probably New York City. And I challenge you to go in the middle of nowhere where it's completely dark and walk for 10 minutes in complete darkness, or walk by yourself for 10 minutes in downtown New York at 2 o'clock in the morning? Which one will you take?
Right.
I would take the wilderness. I'll walk in a national park in pitch darkness at 2 o'clock in the morning any day than walking by myself at 2 o'clock in the morning in downtown New York. And that just tells you that criminal behavior, our sense of safety, depends on many, many other factors than lighting. The other quick example I'll give about criminal behavior is they actually did research on this, where they asked criminals, why do they break into this car on this street rather than that car on that street? They actually had identical streets. This research was done in England somewhere, I forget the name of the town, but they made identical, more or less identical streets, but they lighted it all sorts of different ways. One was just indiscriminate lighting, as you find pretty much anywhere. One was dark sky friendly lighting with well shielded lights, amber colored facing down. And the third street, identical in every other way except that there were no lights installed at all. The lowest break-in rate was in the street with no lights at all. And so they went and asked the criminals why, and they switched the streets around every few months so that there's no biases. And they interviewed the criminals, and they said, when the light is going into the car as I'm walking on the sidewalk, I can look into the car and see, oh, there's a wallet, there's a laptop, there's a charger or whatever. When it's dark, they couldn't see, or they would need a flashlight or something, which is going to attract attention. So their usual practice was one guy walks down the street, scopes out blue sedan over here, black SUV there, whatever, tells friend comes in with a hammer, one slam, knows exactly where the thing is, puts his hand in, takes it out, and walks away before anyone can even blink. Easiest, steal that they can possibly have. So counterproductive if you just tell someone the darkest street had the lowest crime rate, but when you actually think about it, you're going to say, of course, it makes sense. If you asked a child, I have hidden something in one of these cars, and one is a dark street, the other is mildly lit, and the other is fully lit, in which of these streets is the child most likely to find the hidden object?
Right. Just one other follow-up. This attendee is wondering if light causes criminal behavior. Does light make us more criminal-like? Does it make us more agitated or angry, etc.?
I don't know. I think that, like I said, there are many factors for criminal behavior. I mean, it's hard to generalize. I don't think it kind of triggers anything in people, but I mean, health certainly is affected. I mean, we all know this. Most of our health research, I should make this clear though. Most of our health research regarding blue light is coming from indoor lights, because we stare at our phones, we stare at our TVs or computer screens. We have, basically white light in most houses, or at least not amber colored light. You have, a lot of blue light bouncing around indoors. And that has been, so they did research on twins, for example. They found twins who were, and not just one, they found several like these in essentially Europe and North America, where one twin was doing some nighttime work. So they were either a cop who was up at night, or was a doctor who did night shifts, or a nurse who did night shifts. And the other twin was doing a 9 to 5, going back to his family, sleeping at 10 o'clock at night, whatever. And they found statistically, of course, individual things can vary because of several factors, but statistically, the twin who worked at night in high lit environments like hospitals or oil refineries or things like that had higher rates of diabetes, had higher rates of obesity, heart trouble, blood pressure, etc., etc. And they fact, of course, and people say, oh, there are so many other factors. Well, these are scientists. They took other factors into account. So it's not as if they just took one data point and ran with it. They did all sorts of permutations and combinations to show statistically significantly higher prevalence of these kinds of heart disease, blood pressure, etc., in the twin that works late into the night. And in general, even apart from twins, just generally speaking, the rates of all these kind of lifestyle related diseases are higher in people who stay up late, and the gaming community and hospitals, nurses and doctors tend to show these I mean, they have a stressful job, so of course you have to take that into account. But even apart from that, it seems that the light is having an effect.
Well, even here at 5:30, we still have 100 people on. So this is testament to your excellent presentation and how intensely interested so many people are in this topic, which is really good news. So thank you so very much for your presentation. Many
So
thanks.
I posted my email address
Great.
in chat, so just copy paste that and maybe have it thrown into your mail server so that you have it with you. And please do email me. Like I said, information is one thing, but I really want engagement, both at a, between the two organizations as well as individuals. We have lots of programs going on. We need people to participate or lead them. And please join us. Like I said, we are a relatively young organization. We're trying to expand and attract more people, more concerned, enthusiastic, and knowledgeable people like you. There's so much to learn. Like when I read Talame's book about, and then I've been engaged with master naturalists, and now with you guys, you know so much about so many things. I mean, I know one thing in light pollution and astronomy, and it's just expanded my horizons. I've learned so much. So I really would appreciate, more interactions, both at an individual and a kind of organizational level.
Great. Well, thank you so very much. Thanks everyone for joining us. And our next webinar will be August 14th on monarch conservation with the new director of Monarch Watch, Dr. Kristen Baum. So please watch our e-newsletter, social media, website for that and other upcoming events, including several native plant sales in September. And of course, our annual dinner in Columbia on August 17th. If we hope to see you there, please register for that by August 8th. With that, everyone have a good night and thank you so much.
Thank you, Carol. Carol, if you can copy paste the Q&A
Yes,
and send it to me so that in case there are questions in there that weren't addressed or I sloppily answered, which is possible, I can get back.
yes, we can do that. Thank you so very much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye, everyone. Thank you, everyone.